Please use the chat located in the center of the bottom of your screen. We will now start the webinar. Por su comodidad, por favor mantenga cámaras y micrófonos apagados durante el evento. La comunicación queda abierta en el área de chat, ubicada en la parte central inferior de esta plataforma. En este instante comenzamos.
Hello, good morning. I hope that people can hear me. My name is Jorge Duran, and I am the chief of the Secretariat of the Inter-American Committee on Ports, and along with the International Port Community System Association, we'd like to bid you welcome to this webinar, Ports and Customs 2.0. Thank you everybody for joining. Good afternoon for those of you over in Europe, and good morning still for those of you in the Western Hemisphere. As you know, the Inter-American Committee on Ports brings in together the national port authorities of all 34 members of the Organization of American States. In other words, all the sovereign states of the Western Hemisphere. And we have as an objective and a mission to assist in the development of ports that are competitive, that are secure, that are sustainable, that are inclusive, and that are, of course, gender inclusive, and amongst other priorities. So thank you again for tuning in to this webinar of today. As you know, we will be addressing the issue of ports and customs. Now, IPSA, the International Port Community Association, is a strategic ally of the SIP in these capacity buildings, workshops, and webinars in this case. And we addressed some important issues during the last webinar. And now we have with us Mr. Uwe Leifner from IPSA itself and DBH Logistics, as well as Mr. Frank Janssens, who has been at this for years, the international expertise in trade facilitation and border procedures. And we will also have Mr. Andrew Baskin from Hudson Analytics, who is an associate member of the SIP, presenting today different aspects and perspectives of diverse challenges and how they have been overcome in this very important relationship between ports and customs, which needs to be flawless in order for the port to become competitive amongst its peers. So with that said, I would like to, first of all, thank Ms. Mona Swoboda and Ms. Monica Blanco from the SIP Secretariat for helping set this up, as well as my thanks to our technological partner, Real ID, based in Mexico City, for the Zoom and all the technological bits. I must mention Mr. Richard Morton from ICSA, who was going to be with us today, but due to personal matters, he was unable to join us. Richard, I wish you were here. Our thoughts are with you, mate. And with that, I would like to pass this quick opening to Hans Roch, who is the Secretary General, the chairman of the International Port Community Association, and will help me sort of launch this seminar before we turn it over to our moderator, Mona Swoboda. So with that being said, Hans Roch, you have the floor, my friend.
Thank you so much, Jorge, for your kind words and the opening words. And to all the audience, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on the globe. But it is a pleasure to be here again with you and with the Inter-American Committee on Ports, SIP, our strategic partner to combine the knowledge of SIP and IPCSA in a number of webinars. And today it's our fourth webinar together. The first webinar was on PCS in action. The second one was part one of customs and ports. The third one, just in July, we had how to develop a PCS. And today again, ports and customs part two. Customs are a very important part of the infrastructure, or let's say the trade facilitation assets in the port and what has to be happened in the port and around the port. And I'm very happy to have three esteemed speakers today. Uwe Liebschner from DBH, which is our IPCSA customs lead. Frank Janssens, international expert on customs, single window, port community system, trade facilitation, and border procedure. What more should I say about you, Frank? Nothing, I think. And Andrew Baskin, the Vice President of Global Policy and Trade and of Hudson Analytics. So I really hope that today the three speakers will give you a lot of vitamins for the future and what is happening these days in Europe, what's happening these days globally, where our cooperation between the various customs all over the world, cross-border information exchange, etc., etc. So I won't tell any secret about their presentations now, and thank you so much for being here. And I want to go for the introduction of the panelists, and for that, of course, I'll switch over to one of the best moderators I know, Mona Swoboda. Thank you, Mona. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hans. That was very kind. Thank you, Hans and Jorge, of course, for your warm welcome. Welcome to you all also from me. My name is Mona Swoboda. I am program manager at the Inter-American Committee on Ports, and I'm very, very excited and happy to moderate today's webinar and share the floor with such distinguished speakers. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Uwe Liebschner, customs expert at DBH Logistics in Bremen, Germany, and customs committee chairman at IPCSA. A former official at the German Customs Administration, Uwe has over 20 years experience in private sector consulting for customs and foreign trade. At DBH Logistics in Bremen, the company that developed and operates the port community system for Bremen, Bremerhaven, and Wilhelmshaven in Germany. Here he's involved in the design of the processes around the logistic handling and the cross-border movement of goods. And as I mentioned earlier, Uwe is chairman of the IPCSA Customs Committee, where he represents the association at various international meetings and events, including working groups of the European Union Commission in Brussels. Uwe, herzlich willkommen. It's great having you, my friend, and the floor is yours.
Danke. Thank you. Good morning, buenos dias to everyone. Thank you for being with us and also willing to listen. I try now to share my presentation with you. Is it now okay? Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
All right, then let's start and not waste too much of time. As you can see, I'm the next item on the agenda. So once again, good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, Mona, for the nice introduction, and of course also the invitation to be part and to contribute to that webinar again. It seems to me, as Hans mentioned, we had already some webinars and also one on customs matters. It seems to me that it was not that shocking enough what I presented last time, so I got a invitation, and I'm here. So thank you very much, and let's start. Before I turn to the next slide, I would like to put a major question in front of us, and maybe it sounds a very simple question, but let's start with that question: what is a port? And don't be worried, we are not going to start now the philosophical hour, and I'm pretty sure that you're all aware about the fact what a port is, and even kindergarten kids can tell you a number of things what they think is a port is about. So it's not a general discussion on ports, but having now a lot of pictures in front of us when it comes to that discussion, what is a port? Amongst a lot of things, there are pictures like big ships, water, busy activities, logistical activities in the yards, maybe also some romantic sceneries like sailing ships and traveling the wide world. There is one topic on that list, which is, I think, a very important one and should be much more mentioned in the discussions when it comes to port activities. That is simply the fact that the most of the ports we are talking about, and I'm not talking only about maritime, also airports, these ports are borders. And now we are building the bridge to really to our topic today, ports and customs. So when we have now that picture in front of us, that the port is a border, then we are interested in questions like movement of people, movement of vehicles, movement of goods, maybe also safety and security matters. Bringing something into my own country, who is going to protect me? Then there are questions about duties and fees, and of course, trade opportunities. So I'm talking about ports and customs. And as you can see now in my headline, that is not the name of the newest Hollywood blockbuster, Customs Supervision. It is something what happens based on legislation. That means the questions, again, going back to what I have said before, we have a border and how to control the border. Who is going to execute at the border all the tasks of making my country secure, of collecting revenues, collecting duties, and all the other tasks. There are several players, and customs is one of them, very much, or of course, focused on the cargo itself. I have listed now some bullet points here on that slide, which starts simply with the first question in the direction of customs. How, as I said, how can we control, or what have we to do when it comes to cross-border movement of goods? And this is not something like in the good old days where we had a sailing ship and customs was simply looking, okay, there's something arrived, let's go into the port and put our human resources there to control each and every little consignment they are unloading in our port. It is based on a scheme of rules which are set up, and of course in the world we are living in today, it is then supported by more and more electronical and digital solutions. So the first question is really what happens and what is my legal activity and my legal tasks coming out of that when goods are entering the customs territory of my country. And then the next question is, how do I get notice of it from the viewpoint of customs administrations? So who is going to send me some information? And this is, of course, as I said, not something what somebody is thinking, okay, I have a good day today. Do you know what? I'm pointing on that and that person who is going to send me some information. It is really set up in the customs legislation, who is the responsible and obliged person to give which information when at which point in time. When we are talking about that, again, then the legal situation is the one thing. You can't carry out activities for executing things without having a legal framework in place. That is clear. But that is, don't get me wrong now, that is only the legal situation. The next question is how we do that in practice. And as you can see now, I have mentioned here on that slide several other bullet points, which are pointing with the finger on the challenges when it comes to customs supervision and to monitoring the cross-border movement of goods. The first one is, and that is, I guess, a very important one, because as I understood now Jorge well in the introduction, we have a lot of port authorities now with us. And very often the question is, who is getting manifest data at which point? When we are asking that, then it is maybe not a surprise for most of you that customs administrations are using their customs environment with electronic solutions already, for instance, the Assecuda World System. And maybe you also know that manifest data is submitted to that system for customs purposes. But on the other hand, port authorities and other players in the port environment are interested in totally other information, which is not really of interest for the customs. Means that customs is really looking for information related to the cargo mostly, and other players are more looking for vessel information, for information how to calculate fees for in the port environment, and so on and so forth. And then also the question is in the room, what are we talking about? Are we talking about master level information or house level information? Who is really interested in which level of that manifest data? And this discussion, or this issue is really the first point which creates a kind of an irritation between the port players on the one hand and customs on the other hand. And then very often it is then in the discussion, how can we make it happen that we lodge only once that manifest data to one player, and this player is then responsible to split the whole set of the data into the right parts and pass it then to the parties involved and the concerned parties. And when I do that presentations in front of customs people, then it is clear that very often there is then a hand who is then asking, or a comment coming up, but we need that information first because of risk purposes and this and that. To be honest with you, what is very often out of that thinking or out of that discussion is, where do we get that from? I'm not talking about the legal people. That means a declarant or a ship agent is obliged to send it in. I'm talking simply about the way how we get data into our systems. So there are other challenges like how to monitor and how to look after records. Maybe you ask yourself now, but I'm obliged to have my records available for customs all the time. Yes, but there is sometimes not the right possibility to have that records in electronic form and in the right electronic form. And there the discussion starts very often into the direction, who can provide a proper service to have that records keeping mechanisms in place with that customs can easily have access to it. Then we can move on. Again, also free zone questions are in the room. The supervision of customs is everywhere. Means also free zones, even that they are tax-free areas, they are not take out of the customs territory. It is customs territory, means customs has to monitor that free zones as well. How do they do that? In the best case, with having possibilities to having access electronically to free zone records. And then we can continue with also issues or challenges around the guarantee management for instance, bonded cargo, or even for the scheme of, we call it in Europe, the temporary storage, which is somehow also bonded cargo, but I'm not talking about the customs warehousing. I'm talking about terminals and yards where simply the goods are stored for a certain period of time connected to a guarantee scheme. And last but not least, and that is the most important line here or item on that slide, is how to bring then that commercial release on the logistics side in the port together with a customs release means only then we can move the goods in which direction ever, into the hinterland to bring it to the consignee, or we are having now the permit to load it onto the next vessel for exportation. There are a lot of other challenges, and yeah, we have only 15 minutes here in the speaking slot. So normally I can fill up hours with creating a huge list of challenges, what to take into consideration when we are talking about customs supervision, using electronic possibilities for that and so on. But yeah, we only have that 15 minutes, so I point my finger onto the main ones. What is also worth to mention on how to monitor from the viewpoint of customs goods which are foreseen for transshipment. So we have experienced in several ports around the globe that this is really an issue for customs administrations, and sometimes not really, even when we have the latest version of Assecuda and nicely configured it. Transshipment goods are really an issue for customs, how to monitor that. And this is then a nice thing where PCS environments or PCS solutions can step in and provide something what is then interface to the customs systems, or customs has an access to a helping tool to monitor also transshipment goods. Last but not least, export. Yeah, sometimes there are the question, have the goods really left the territory? And you have, I'm pretty sure, heard about the fact that an export manifest is also submitted to customs into their environment to have a clear idea what have all left my country or the territory. But sometimes you need an additional information about, has it really loaded to the vessel, and has the vessel left the territory, the 12-mile zone of my country? And there are then at the end also technical questions in the room, because yeah, very often you hear that customs has developed their own environment with a huge effort and a huge investment into resources and money. That is not the question. That is really what we should put an applause for. But sometimes when you have that discussions, then you stick in, yeah, but we have an electronic solution with a log on and upload mechanism. It's not a system-to-system approach. And of course, for mid-size or tiny countries, that is fine to have log on and then uploading manifest data onto Assecuda, for instance. But when it comes to more volume and more activities in the ports, then this question is really a tricky one. Is it not better to have a system-to-system approach and having the right interfacing in place from machines outside of the customs environment, but into customs, and giving then more space for automation and a more speed up process? There are a lot of other challenges, and when I have here some of them on my slides, then I don't want to explain them all in an exhausting way, but from the customs point of view, again, very often it is asked now to the direction of customs administrations, is there a possibility in our country or for us to have a pre-clearancing? That is maybe another webinar, what we have to organize only around the topic of pre-clearancing. What is that really about, and what can customs offer and do, and how to make it happen? What I would like to mention here today is related to the port and customs supervision, is really that when do customs really know that the goods which have been pre-cleared already have arrived in my port? That can be also connected to sending in the manifest data into a ASICUDA system, right? But again, we are talking about automation. We are talking about interfaces to different players who have, let's say, the terminal is unloading that specific goods, and at the same moment, an information is going out, on the one hand, to the terminal operator, that we have now goods in the stock. We expected that, please put it into yard number so-and-so and box so-and-so. And at the same time, this information goes to customs, and customs can then use that information for, we have already pre-clearanced it, so we can give automatically an release on that if we have no other concerns or not a request for control. As I said, we can put that in several webinar, and it is a topic which can be exhausted for hours when it comes only to that understanding of the pre-clearance mechanisms. Move on, trigger events. So I have already mentioned that now a little bit in that pre-clearance thing, but I want to hop to immediately to the next bullet point, digitization versus digitalization. What is the difference? And this is really what should be a major point in the discussions when we are nowadays, when it comes to introduction of new solutions like port community systems, like single windows for the country, and so on and so forth. Digitization is simply replacing paper with electronic means. That can also be an Excel sheet, but that is not digitalization. Digitalization is about digitizing the whole of the process and not having somewhere an Excel sheet what is then sent over via an email to somebody who is going to print it out and put it into the records of the next company or the authority concerned. It is really to go that way of how far we can make it happen to automate and to have a flow with status and status information, having a proper status model behind the whole thing, and having the right trigger events to make the goods moving without any burdens and without any time delays. And last but not least on that slide, customs act as a border champion. We say it like this in Europe. Why? Because customs is mostly has to carry out also activities which are delegated by other authorities like veterinary, like health, like phytosanitary, and so on. And this is done by customs administrations. And now this is the bridge builder for the next slide. Create the right understanding between or what is a PCS versus a single window.
Uwe, just briefly giving you a heads up that you have 2 more minutes.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not going to say that much anymore about the PCS environment because that was done in former seminars, but I try to highlight bullet points in green, which are the important ones. So when we are talking about port community systems and single windows, then if it's not a trade single window on the private side, then we have the issue that single windows are mostly introduced for the use of the governmental entities and the governmental side. As I said now, delegated to customs from other authorities, a lot of other tasks. And this is then done via that single window, hopefully, to have an electronic exchange with other partner competent authorities or in the cross-border movement of the goods involved other authorities. But very often then in that discussions around that single window approaches is not covered the fact that we have also a B2B side. And there is where the port community comes into the picture and gives the possibility to build that link and the interfacing from the government side to the private sector side. Here we have an example of the port in Wilhelmshaven, where customs is connected to different services. But as you can see, the port community system in Wilhelmshaven has much more functionalities to offer, which are not of interest for the customs administration itself. So customs in that picture is then really connected only to that bits and functionalities in the port community system environment, which is of very interest for customs and the customs flow of the goods. Single window, there is a UN recommendation, and I would like really to highlight that word, recommendation. Don't stick too much on a single window has to look like this. No, it is, you have to think about your local environment. You have to think about your purposes. What do you really need? And what should your single window cover? And then you find out, or you will realize that, that we are talking about interoperation between different solutions and maybe also different single windows at the end. And also, as I said, between a governmental single window solution and the port community for the private sector part in the ports. The World Customs Organization has defined their own idea about what a customs single window should look like. So fulfill all import, export and transit related regulatory requirements. That means also that sometimes in that discussion, yes, shouldn't it be only one single window for the country? No, it is, again, it should fulfill all that task and give you a possibility to cover all that what is necessary for your purposes and for your matters. I have now here some slides with some examples. Only want to mention on the first slide here, you have to take care about when you think about single window approaches that we are talking about, on the one hand, the side of application or applying for certificates, applying for permits, for licenses. And then the second layer is really when it comes to the clearance of the goods. That means importation of the goods and how to monitor them, that you have the right licenses and permits for your declared goods. The second example is the ACE system in the US. I think it's very well known to all of you. Very often we have the discussion when it comes to single windows, but it takes us that long to put it in operation, to put it in place. When you look on the example from the US, you will see that it took also a high sophisticated country like the US a very, very long time to get their single window for customs and border protection into operation. And I would like to highlight here from that slide, or giving out that message, look for the right political mandate before you start your project. Another example from Nigeria, very, very important, is in all of that examples and in all of that activities that you have a cooperation with all the authorities on the governmental side, but also between authority governmental side and the private sector to bring the whole thing to the right success. Some other examples where it went very well, and we all, on the one hand, on the other hand, there are activities really in the market. So if you consider in the next few days, yes, let's do something like this, or we are already having a decision made on implementing, introducing a PCS or a single window, you are not alone on the globe. There is a lot of movement and a lot of interest. Last but not least, single window, to have a difference between customs single window and maritime side. And as I said in the beginning, there are maybe a lot of single windows which have to interoperate with each other. Also, the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, has launched via the File Committee Session 46 that the electronic data exchange for ship clearings should be mandatory, or not shall be mandatory from 2024 on. That means there is a different view on manifest data again, also from a collecting side, also from a perspective of a single window, maybe for maritime purposes, and that does not fit one-to-one with a customs single window, to be honest. I tried to accelerate a little bit, but as you know me, Mona, I can't speak for hours.
No, Uwe, thank you so much. It just speaks for the vast experience that you have, and I'm very much looking forward to picking your brain in the Q&A later on. So if you do, I saw there was already a question for you, Uwe, in the chat. And just a reminder to our participants, if you do have questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and then we'll get to them later on in the Q&A. And I'm looking forward to chatting a little bit more with you, Uwe, maybe talk a little bit more about those challenges, but also opportunities you mentioned in your presentation. So we'll have time to get back to that later. Thank you so much, Uwe.
Thank you.
Up next is Frank Janssens. Frank is a well-known international expert, researcher, and consultant in the domains of customs, single window, port community systems, trade facilitation, and border procedures. He assists international organizations such as the IMF, the World Bank, ITC, and the Global Alliance on trade facilitation, as well as national authorities in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia on facilitating the cross-border procedures and setting up a performant and qualitative electronic port and airport services. Frank is vice president of the French Trade Facilitation Organization, supporting its members by providing information and training, as well as promoting trade facilitation and cooperation with authorities as well as companies. Frank is also a member of the EU Customs Trade Contact Group. And as a former head of unit at the European Commission, he's quite knowledgeable also of the customs policy, legal, IT, and procedural issues. Frank, we are so excited to have you and are looking forward to your presentation.
I was still muted, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Mona, for the very complete introduction, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for joining us. So I will, after you have been thoroughly briefed by Uwe, I will, in my presentation, try to point to relevant experience and new trends which are relevant for ports, PCSs, and of course also for customs and border services. Yeah. Then in my presentation, I want to highlight 4 points, which you can see on the slide. So first of all, as I said, a bit of experience in terms of improving or extending port community systems. Then secondly, I want to say a word on the importance of data management. Number 3, as a trend, also emerging trend, I must say, is the need for using modern inspection technology. And then as the 4th point, I would like to share with you a newest initiative at the European Union level, where a regulation has been approved, which will replace and re-engineer what is now paper transport documents to have a digital system for managing transport operations. So first of all, in terms of the experience, how can you best cover the needs of customs and border officials? Uwe has spoken to you about the need to supervise, but also trade facilitation. And my personal opinion is that the two can go hand in hand, and one can strengthen the other. And one way to doing that is to provide as much as possible access to the competent authorities of the digital information you have in your PCS and or in the single window. And that will help very much the trade facilitation, but all information can be used by the authorities to target better their control. So access to information, first of all, enables them to perform automated risk analysis. So things go much quicker because they're executed by the machine, but supervised, of course, by customs experts who look at the more complex cases. Also, it enables the information and the risk analysis, enables that the inspection can happen only once. So all of the services can be managed that they do together an inspection. So the goods are only inspected once. And best is to do that by a system of appointment where each of the services can indicate the slots they are available, and then trade can choose the best one according to their commercial needs. And then that leads to a, I would say, quick and efficient inspection. And then the third point is, on the basis of the information and the result, either of the risk analysis and, if necessary, of the inspection, then the release of the goods can be made available online to the transporter to take either the goods out of the port on the land side, or to load it on the vessel if it leaves as an export on the maritime side. So also that here the PCS can combine, as Uwe said, the needs of the private industry, because of course the goods must be ready for transportation, and the public sector who have done the necessary controls. If you organize it in this way, it opens a lot of possibilities for the port community systems, and it speeds up things for the public sector and also makes their life, I would say, more easy and more efficient. Then what can you do in order to further improve port community systems? First of all, to connect all of the border services. Now we see that very often it's only the customs that is connected, and maybe the migration services, the border police, but also it's important to have plant control, veterinary services, and other services who are competent at the border, so that they have access to the information, and as I said, can participate in possible inspections that would be needed. Another trend that we are seeing is to make the investments for a PCS much more efficient, and they can be written off, I would say, more rapidly or more efficiently, is to extend the geographic coverage. We see that in many countries, there is a trend that one system is created, but it serves several ports. I worked on the PCS preparations in Pakistan, and there immediately from the start, we agreed it would serve 3 maritime ports. There are other countries like in the Netherlands where it can serve a maritime port and an airport. The same is in the Emirates, where this choice has been taken. And the third example is dry ports, which are really areas inland where goods can be deposited or collected, and then they are transported under supervision of the authorities to the maritime port or to the airport, so that the, I would say, administrative and control tasks can be done upstream, and they avoid the congestion at the maritime ports. Then, of course, also further additional services could be added, as I mentioned already, appointment systems, improved connections to the terminal operating systems and the dry ports. So these are examples of how you can improve things. I want to share with you one example where this has been put into practice in the last 3-4 years. This is the creation of what is called an advanced trade and logistics platform. It started in Abu Dhabi from the maritime port community system in Khalifa Port. It was then gradually extended to other means of transport. So also rail connections, road connections were added to the PCS. Then also services like to request and obtain licenses and permits. So we go in the direction there of the single window, and then gradually to that also further, I would say, commercial services have been added to make it into an advanced trade and logistics platform. And the last addition which was made is what they call invisible customs, means that you, by logging on to the trade platform, which is an improved PCS and single window, you can make your customs declaration, you can put in your declarations, immediately customs can see them, they can validate them, and then it can enter into the risk analysis and so on. So for the trader and the transporter, it is invisible customs. Of course, what is behind it is the same things, but they are integrated in a digital way, and that helps very much the trade and the officials. Then further parts of the advanced trade logistics platform is that it includes an inspection and clearance module. So there is an appointment system, and all of the services can indicate their availability. The trader can choose a slot, and then the inspection happens at the agreed moment. Also, one of the services is the pre-arrival declaration. So the goods can be declared, they can be analyzed for risk by the customs. And when the goods then finally arrive, the customs can indicate whether they want to inspect or not. If they are not to be inspected, then the release of the goods can be given and the goods can leave then the, I would say, controlled area of the maritime border. And all of this leads to faster operations, so lower costs for operations and also lower administrative costs. There is less paper involved, there is less interactions involved, it's much better integrated. And they also have a website which you can look up at Google, and it gives you with some small movies, it shows you how it works. Then the next point I want to make is the importance of data management. What happens more and more for border procedures is that a data model is being used by all of the partners, which means that there is a standardized approach to data so that different services and different traders, they use the same terminology for the same thing, and they submit the data in advanced agreed formats, as you can see on the slide. For example, the reference number, it is alphanumeric 22, which means the reference number can have letters and figures, and the length is 22 characters. And it is compatible also, in the best cases, with the data model of the World Customs Organization. That means if later on you want to exchange information either with neighboring countries or with other services, you are, I would say, a loyal user of an international standard, and that puts you in a strong position for international cooperation. And that is very useful, as we have seen. Not only trade has become more global, but also the public services are more and more working in mutual support and exchange of information, and that can be done then on a common basis. Another point of a new trend which I want to share with you is the use of modern control techniques and technologies. There are two major reasons for that, or objectives. One is to go faster, because the number of goods traded always increase, and there is not always staff to control those consignments which could be suspicious. So work is taken over by a machine. That's the first one. Second one is not to cause damage to the goods. So here I give two examples. On the left-hand side, it is X-ray equipment, but the particularity of it here is that the X-ray images which are made are compared to historic images, and in that way the machine, by artificial intelligence, can see whether according to the description of the goods and the images that is given, whether it responds to the expected images. If yes, then probably no control will happen. If no, the next step is that then it still goes to an expert, and this person then decides whether a control or not is happening. But this can reduce the number of intervention by experts by 90%, because the advantage of artificial intelligence is that it also learns as it builds up experience. The other example is what we call the e-nose. It's an electronic sensor which sniffs into the containers and try to find out suspect goods. This is especially used a lot to finding narcotics, and that can be done without, offloading the container. Often they are filled with gas, so you need to degas it. It's a whole operation. It's costly. It damages the goods if the gas is out, and so on. If you think about, for example, fruit and vegetables, which are being transported, these e-nose with the microsensor is an upcoming technology on which a lot of research is being done, and tests are being done by the border authorities. Now, the last point I want to make is the electronic freight transport information regulation. So that is the legal basis. As Uwe said, you always need a legal basis. And what it tries to do is to solve a number of problems that for the moment we have in terms of the drivers, the transporters on the land side. We have multiple and non-interoperable systems. So several systems exist, but they cannot speak to one another. And we also have a lot of legal requirements. So here we try to solve the situation where you can see that the result of this non-harmonization is that 99% use still paper, but inside the company they use a digital approach. But to do the transport, always a document is printed out and then inspected by the authorities. And that is the problem to be solved. So here, what we want to do with the regulation is, first of all, not change all of the details of transport regulation, but implement an electronic system that contains the information, but respects the given framework of how transport is being done. And it will have common requirements, which means in Europe, the system will be used in 27 countries, which are a member of the European Union. There will be an obligation for all the authorities to accept the digital information, which can be a QR code or a link to a website. And all of the information need to be stored on certified systems, which we call EFTI platforms. And that all of the transporters will upload that on certified platforms. And that is where the authorities can see it. So the driver will simply show a barcode or a QR code or the URL. And from there on, the authorities can find it. We are now at the stage of discussing the architecture, where on top you see the economic operator, mainly the transporter. You see the FT platform, where all of the information will be stored. And at the bottom, you see the controlling authorities who will be logged onto an access point. For example, police officers, they will all be logged on to the digital system of the police. And we will have one for each of the 27 countries, a national access point, which will provide direct access to the FT platform concerned, so that the control officer can see at the source, the transport information. Then we come to the last slide, and I think I'm still more or less on time. We started with the regulation in the summer 2020, so two years ago. Now we're working mainly, as I said, on the architecture, also on the technology with selected expert groups. We will approve next year what we call secondary legislation. We call them delegated acts and implementing acts, which will lay down mainly the specifications of the system. And then from August 25, the whole system will be operational, and the authorities will be obliged to accept the electronic identification and check the information at the source. And this will be reviewed in 29. And for the period between 25 and 29, the operator can choose whether he will use paper or the digital approach. The officials must accept both. But from the revision of 29, if enough progress is being made, there is a possibility that all paper transport documents will be abolished and that the use of the electronic system will become mandatory. So this is an important trend which is now implemented in Europe, but I work also a lot in the Middle East, and I see also there they're trying to go to a fully digital environment. So it's also for the Americas, for you, I think it's interesting to know that this goes on and that sooner or later this may come also in the Americas. I will stop here because I know we're in need of time. So Mona and everyone, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Frank. That was a very, very rich presentation. You shared with us a lot of information, and we're excited to let our participants know that the presentations will be available on our website once we conclude this webinar, so you can go back and take a little deeper look at them. But thank you so much, Frank, for your presentation, and I'm sure we'll have a great discussion later on in the Q&A. Thank you again. Last, but definitely not least, I would like to give the floor to my good friend, Andrew Baskin. Andrew Baskin is Vice President of Global Policy and Trade and General Counsel at Hudson Analytics, a global port and maritime risk management firm, where he leads the firm's ports modernization practice. He oversees projects related to port digitalization, legislation and regulation, operations and governance, supply chain security, and environmental frameworks. Andrew also co-leads the firm's cyber risk management practice in the Western Hemisphere, which focuses on insurance advisory, threat assessments, risk management planning, and awareness training. Very much looking forward to your presentation, Andrew, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you. Let's see if I can, Mona, if you could confirm if I'm able to share screen without any minor technical glitches. Are you seeing the screen? All right, we're seeing the screen. We're not seeing notes. We're not seeing anything weird. Excellent.
Just the screen.
All right, that's great. So, well, thank you, Mona, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is indeed Andrew Baskin from Hudson Analytics. I want to thank Mona, Jorge, Montse, Sabina, Monica, the entire OAS team for organizing this webinar and inviting me to participate as a panelist alongside Frank and Uwe. We've heard from Frank and Uwe about PCS trends and about the mostly friendly intersection between ports and customs and a PCS. And now we'll get to the topic that most often goes viral, right, in the PCS world, which is, of course, legal frameworks. So let's jump right in. Here are the contents of this presentation. I'll briefly introduce Hudson and the topic. We'll dive into the legal issues surrounding PCS-related data sharing and exchange among government agencies. We'll talk about the legal niceties of electronic transactions in the context of the PCS. And then as the cherry on top of this legal framework Sunday, we'll talk about data protection and data privacy. All right, so a very brief introduction. I'll talk about Hudson Analytics for one slide so I don't get any side eye from our CEO at the next company meeting. Hudson is a small woman-owned risk management firm that for the past 36 years has supported the global maritime transportation sector, which of course includes ports and terminals, energy companies, ship owners and operators, governments, NGOs, and insurance underwriters. In the port sector in particular, we help ports and terminals tackle challenges in planning and operations, digitalization, and governance. We have presence in 11 cities across 3 continents. Our headquarters are outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area, where I have the honor and privilege of living close, but not too close, to Jorge Duran. That is enough about Hudson. Let's jump into legal frameworks. So establishing a legal framework for PCS requires the consideration of the various laws, regulations, and other legal directives that might exist within a given jurisdiction that could have a bearing on the exchange of logistics information. And that is, of course, the purpose of the PCS. This analysis is multifaceted and always varies by jurisdiction. So we will not, despite popular demand, perform an exhaustive examination of the various legal issues that can arise. Instead, we'll look at 3 areas of law that are fairly common to a PCS legal framework. and how they might need to be organized or considered within this framework. And these are, as I mentioned earlier, data exchange among government agencies, electronic transactions, and data protection and privacy. Let's start with data exchange among government agencies. So PCSs, as we all know, have many, many stakeholders, and many of them are private sector entities who have significant leeway in deciding what information they want to share and how they want to share it. But there are many public sector entities too, excuse me, that participate. And we've heard about some of those today during Uwe and Frank's presentations. And without these public sector entities, a PCS is much less useful than it otherwise would be. Excuse me. But these public sector entities' authorities are bound by a variety of laws, regulations, and other legal directives. And we have to be mindful of those structures when implementing the PCS. But at the same time, we of course want to be sure that the PCS user, such as we're going to pick a user entirely at random right now, we're going to pick Mona. We want to make sure that Mona enjoys a smooth, seamless experience. We want Mona to have zero idea of the turmoil and tumult involved in ensuring that the various government agencies involved in the movement of cargo into, through, and out of a port, that they receive the information that they need when they need it. But sometimes existing legislation or existing regulation doesn't allow that. For instance, there could be conflicting laws or regulations, right? One law or regulation may prescribe that one entity, such as customs, receives a piece of data in a certain way at a certain time, while another law or regulation may require that another public entity, such as a port authority, receives that same piece of data in a different way at a different time. Or different laws or regulations may prescribe that two entities, again, such as customs and a port authority, receive duplicative data in different ways at the same time, and thereby eliminating the possibility for the PCS to be a single point of submission for logistics data. In these cases, when laws are in conflict, resolution typically has to occur through either the passage of new legislation or adoption of new regulations to remedy that conflict. So, but in addition to conflicting laws and regulations, sometimes they may be ambiguous on an issue, such as whether a critical agency, such as customs or agriculture or health, can even share or receive certain information that might be necessary to the smooth functioning of a PCS. Or even worse, existing laws and regulations may simply be silent on an issue and not address it at all. And this silence or ambiguity can create confusion. Now, the ideal way to resolve this confusion would, of course, be through passing legislation or adopting regulations as may be appropriate. But as we all know, legislative and regulatory processes are not known for their speed. So in certain instances where laws and regulations are not in direct conflict, or if they are in conflict but allow agencies a certain degree of discretion, a memorandum of understanding or a service level agreement, an MOU or an SLA, might be a useful way to define information flows and those related responsibilities. That was data exchange among government agencies. Now let's take a look at electronic transactions. So a PCS implementation, of course, has to consider this legal framework, because if we go back to that PCS user we picked entirely at random, pre-PCS, Mona might submit paper documents for all sorts of logistical matters. And she might need to sign certain paper documents by hand in order for those documents to have legal effect. But how does that requirement translate to a PCS world? Well, first, we need to have a law that recognizes the legal effect and validity of digital transactions. We have to make electronic records functionally equivalent with paper documents. This is, of course, critical for an effective PCS implementation. In addition, where signatures might be required upon the submission of certain documents or other information into the PCS, we want to be sure that electronic signatures are sufficient to meet that requirement, and that it's clearly established what are the elements that make an electronic signature valid. We want to understand that so that we can have an electronic signature that carries the same weight as when Mona signs on a piece of paper. And then finally, in certain instances, to encourage the use of a PCS, we might want to consider a legal requirement, making use of that PCS mandatory. There are certain instances in which this is a great idea, other instances maybe less so, that we might want to make the electronic submission of certain logistics information mandatory. Those are electronic transactions and signatures. And now, finally, but certainly not any less important, is the topic of data privacy. So we should note up front that data privacy is distinct from the type of data security that we often think about and that I've often actually presented about in SIP webinars and then back in those halcyon days of in-person events. Data security touches on issues such as data availability, data confidentiality, and data integrity. These topics are important, but they're distinct from data privacy. Data privacy deals with the handling of personal data, such as a person's name, contact information, location, things like that. And data privacy laws, and those are laws that provide a legal framework on how to obtain, use, and store personal data, are continuing to grow in number, and they're also continuing to grow in breadth and depth. So it's a topic that we need to consider within the context of a PCS, because a PCS that handles personal data, which is to say every single PCS, has to comply with the data privacy laws in its jurisdiction. Now, data privacy laws, of course, vary by jurisdiction, but there are some commonalities which we'll touch on here right now. First, most data privacy laws require a data protection assessment. And as a PCS is a repository of a large amount of potentially sensitive data, including personal data, a PCS operator needs to conduct this assessment to determine the processing operations it will perform on PCS data. And then prior to performing that processing, the operator needs to assess the potential impact of this processing on how it protects personal data. In addition, most data privacy laws require the designation of an organizational data privacy officer or data protection officer, depending on how it's defined in the given law. And this is someone who's responsible for ensuring that the organization applies the law or laws protecting personal data, and also advises the organization's decision makers on the organization's processing of personal data. And then finally, and sometimes the legally most tricky, is that most data privacy laws require that an organization like a PCS operator have procedures in place to, first of all, obtain a data subject's consent to collect and process that data subject's personal data, and then also that the data subject needs to be able to withdraw that consent at the data subject's discretion. This is not always present in every single data privacy law, but it's extremely common and one we need to be aware of. That is data privacy. So those are three areas that we should consider when developing a legal framework. I know that legal frameworks, again, are extremely exciting, particularly at the end of an over-hour-long webinar. So let's all review them while we have a big group hug. First, we should consider how existing laws and regulations affect the exchange of data among government agencies. We need to consider whether new laws or regulations, or in certain instances, memoranda of understanding or service level agreements, might be a useful way to define information flows and related responsibilities. Second, we should consider how we ensure that electronic transactions and electronic signatures have the same validity as paper documents and handwritten signatures. And finally, we should ensure that the PCS complies with local data privacy laws, whatever they might be in a given jurisdiction. And this could involve tasks like performing a data protection assessment, appointing a data protection officer, and making sure we have consent to collect personal data. Thank you all for your time. We want to make this quick and to the point and leave plenty of time for what I hope are just easy questions during our roundtable. So thank you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and only hard questions for Andrew, please. And thank you also, Andrew, for picking a decent picture. And of course, very much looking forward to continuing the discussion on the legal framework now in the upcoming Q&A with you, Andrew. So with that being said, I would like to invite all three speakers back on screen for our Q&A session. Uwe, Frank, Andrew, you're still here. And also remind our audience that you may ask away in the chat. I know there was a question for Uwe I already peaked, and then I, of course, also have some questions for our panelists. And I'm going to start with a very easy question, of course, for Frank. Frank, what do you see as the main challenges for PCS operators, ports, and customs in today's day and age?
Well, I think it was Uwe who said there are many challenges, but I think I'd like to give a few examples of, I would say, important challenges. The first one, I think, is congestion, both at the maritime side as at the land side. So that will need to be managed at the maritime side. There are already initiatives to plan the arrival of the vessels to adapt their speed during the voyage, a bit comparable to the airline traffic and so on. So that's the first thing that needs to be managed. Then I think the second challenge would be the lack of harmonization of the information and the legislation. I refer here to what Andrew has said, where we still have a lot of work to be done. Legislation, he explained it very much. The information is mainly to do with the data model, that you need to harmonize the information. And then maybe the last example is how to deal efficiently with threats. And here, narcotics and weapons, so security threats are big. And I have given some examples of how technology and also, of course, risk management can help us very much. That remains a big challenge, which also needs a lot of investments and constantly new progress on the side of the fraudsters and efforts on the public side to catch up. This is a bit how I see the most important areas of challenges. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Frank. And with that, I would like to actually just follow up with a question for Andrew. Frank mentioned the security aspect, and Andrew, when you talked about data privacy in your presentations, you mentioned it was different from data security. Are there aspects to data security that we should consider in the context of the PCS legal framework? Because that's what you mainly discuss in your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Mona. It's a great question. I could not have written it better myself. A port, so it's a data security. So a port that implements a PCS is, of course, bringing all of its port, or many of its port ecosystem partners even closer together. And that creates efficiencies, but it also creates risks. Because in a PCS, what we're doing is bringing together, crane and cargo handling equipment, internal operating management software. We're bringing together security vendors, cloud service providers, all those different government agencies, and then all the sort of private parties that will engage with the PCS, shipping agents, transporters, folks like that. All of them will be exchanging and processing sensitive information, and that can be attractive to cyber threat actors, and each one's vulnerabilities become the other's vulnerabilities. So in agreements with both public and private sector entities that will be using the PCS, whether it's MOUs, SLAs, or then terms of use agreements with private entities that are engaging with the PCS, it's a good idea to build in certain cyber risk management elements. This could include requiring basic cybersecurity awareness training for all PCS users, for any individual within a PCS user organization that will be accessing the PCS. That's a great idea. And also one that would typically be required is ensuring that there are breach notification clauses in all agreements. So if one entity that is a PCS user suffers a cyber incident, that they need to notify at a minimum the PCS operator and perhaps others who engage with the PCS so that they can take appropriate action based on the incident in question. So those are two recommendations we give: the training and then breach notification clauses.
Thank you, Andrew. Uwe, I have a question for you from Richard here in the chat. And Richard asks or wants to know, what is the difference between a port ship manifest and a customs manifest? And is the data different?
I can give a very brief answer. Richard knows that. But the question is, of course, for the webinar. So,
Yes.
So of course, as I mentioned in my presentation, there is very often that discussion, which entity is getting which data set and what is the content of. So I'm pretty sure that the audience is aware about the different file forms of the IMO. And file 2 is that data set which is covering the customs cargo manifest data, and this is really what customs is in the first jump interested in. And as I said in my presentation, not more, but I say that now more dramatically, they are really interested into the house level. And when we are looking now on the other players in the game, then we have, of course, other interests. They are a port authority or the harbor master is not really interested in the cargo manifest. Maybe there are some examples where they are, but mostly they are not. Then you have different pieces or different variations of the manifests. On the one hand, you have import manifests, and you have for the export another manifest, the export manifest, and so on and so forth. So we can create a huge list of different manifests configurations for the different situations, and this is now really the beauty of a PCS, where you handle all the different parts or all the different varieties of that manifest data for the certain situations, and related to that rule scheme, what is behind the whole thing, to share the data with really that parties who have to get which data at the right moment. So that is really the beauty of the PCS. I don't want to bring more into that answer, but please allow me to add something to Andrew's answer before. I'm not a cybersecurity specialist here, but I can tell you out of the experiences of DBH, where I'm employed, and as you said in the introduction, we are the operator for some ports in Germany, for the port community system there. We have roundabout, only to give you a number and an idea, when we are talking about cybersecurity, we have per day roundabout 30,000 attacks on our servers. So we are operating a server and data center for the PCS, and this is really a huge amount of attacks. What is the learning bit out of it? And this is maybe an additional advice to what Andrew have already said. When you look on your ports and all what is related to that port activities, and also to the digital environment in the ports, then we are talking about critical infrastructure for a country. And when you have realized and recognized that we are talking about critical infrastructure, then there should be, of course, a governmental entity or a governmental place, even when we are talking about private acting companies in the ports, which is the responsible ministry or the responsible governmental entity for the crisis and disaster management in your country. And then it comes, why do I tell you that? Because out of this, you have then a clear understanding of where you may get funds for investing into a better cybersecurity environment. Only as a additional thought.
Excellent. Uwe, can you just briefly answer the part of, is the data different in the different manifests? Yes, but it's not per data box. So we are not talking about different data elements. We are talking about the data as a content in that different configurations. Yes, it is different. Okay, thank you. I have a question here for Frank from Neil. Thank you, Neil, for your question. And he would like to know, Frank, what are the biggest challenges to implementing a pre-clearance regime to a country?
Yeah, so the pre-clearance means that as soon as the means of transport arrives, the driver or the person in charge will know whether he or she can leave or whether there will be further formalities or inspections. That's the basis. To illustrate what is needed, I can give two examples. One area where you have a lot of congestion is between the ferry services between the United Kingdom and France. Another one is between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, where there is only a bridge. It's called the King Fahd Causeway. There's only a bridge, and the customs are in the middle. So it's clear that things need to go fast. So what do you need to be able to go fast? You need to take a decision immediately on clearing the goods. To be able to do that, you need to have all of the information digital. So at least the customs declaration. Later on, as I have said, you could also have the transport documentation digital. If you have the information in advance, then you have to apply risk analysis. So with that, with the information you have to see whether the content is reasonable. For example, if there are bananas from Russia, it's clear there is something wrong and you better have a look to it. So risk analysis is important. The third thing is clear instructions who can leave and who cannot leave, so that there are no jams or congestions because of lack of information or misunderstanding. So there it is easily done by creating an app, and then the driver receives either the clear or he is told to which gate he has to go for an inspection. In some of the areas, there are also big like television screens where they can see the status of their goods, or there are also helplines they can phone. So these would be, the preconditions for things to go really fast. The real pre-clearance is that your goods are released before you are at the border, exists only in very few cases, and is only given to really trusted traders, and that are normally very few traders who get a special license and who have a certificate of authorized economic operator, and then they can even get information shortly before arriving at the border. You will not be inspected, you can just drive through. I leave it at that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Frank, for the answer. You have an ability to really beautifully explain the complexity of this process. So thank you very much for that. And I am not a customs expert by any means, so I understood it. So thank you very much for that. Andrew, there's a question here for you in the chat. Final question for the panel, and then we will wrap it up. And that question is from Inga. Hi, Inga. And she's asking, could you please elaborate how electronic signatures are relevant to PCS operations in practical terms? And then Inga shares with us, and I invite everyone to read her remark here. She shares with us some of the IPCSA experience as it relates to the electronic signatures. So, and then I see Uwe has his hand up. So, Andrew, I'll pass it on over to you.
Thank you, Mona and Uwe, and thank you, Inga, for the question as well. So there's a movie from the 1980s, The Princess Bride, where there's a character at the end, after everything has gone on, it says, let me explain, thinks about it for a second, says, no, there's too much, let me sum up. And I think Inga, your question is a great one, and I think we're a victim of time in the way I phrased a couple of things. The PowerPoint was trying to use the term electronic or digital signatures to encapsulate, and you're entirely right, that we need to have proper mechanisms for the identification, authentication, and authorization of users. And much of that then is tied at a minimum to sort of national law developments, ensuring that the legal infrastructure is in place to ensure that we can identify, authenticate, and authorize certain users to, quote, sign off on certain information or documents that they're required to do so via by hand right now. There are a variety of different ways to do it. I am I'm a lawyer, so I'm the least technical person on every panel I ever sit on. So I'll defer to technical colleagues for those technical details, but you're absolutely right that there's a variety of ways that we can ensure that the person who we think is signing a document is in fact that person, and would encourage anyone implementing a PCS to avail themselves of those different mechanisms that exist, but to do so in a way that complies with national legal requirements for valid electronic or digital signatures. That's a great question.
Great answer. Thank you, Andrew. Uwe, I'll pass it on over to you for some final considerations and to wrap up our panel discussion.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that Andrew is now afraid about that I'm adding again something to his response. But this time, I
Never,
would like to add something to Frank's response and the question what was addressed to him. It was about pre-clearancing. And if I understood the question right, what is the biggest challenge for implementing? And I can say the change in the mindset. What do I mean by that? And Frank has very nicely described what are really the challenges and what do you have to take care about. But when it comes really to that question of should we introduce a pre-clearancing and what is it really about, then it is necessary that also on the side of customs administrations, there is a kind of thinking mechanism what we really understand under that phrase or under that functionality of a pre-clearancing. And as Frank said, it is not the case that in each and every configuration of a pre-clearance scheme, we are talking about also the release of the goods before arrival. It's simply to have a possibility for customs to do their decision-making process prior the goods have arrived, so winning time. And in the moment when the goods really are presented or have arrived in the ports, then when there is no change or no dramatical other decision which overrides the old one, then we have a possibility to have then the release more on an automatic way or within seconds. And that is really the beauty when it comes to that discussion around pre-clearancing. But that you see with the answer of Frank and my additional comment to that, it is worth really to explain that in a much more broader format, because there are a lot of different possibilities and playing fields, let's say, to configure a pre-clearancing scheme for the country and the certain culture which is in the country. Is sometimes we are talking about trust levels and so on. Yeah.
Thank you, Uwe. That was a great addition to Frank's answer, and I think a very fitting answer to wrap up this panel discussion, because it showed the importance of the collaboration between ports and customs, which was the topic of the session. And I think you highlighted that very beautifully, how interconnected these entities are and have to be to promote smooth facilitation of goods and trade. So thank you very much, gentlemen. It was an honor to moderate the session, and especially it's so much fun when it's amongst friends. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Uwe. And I would now like to pass it on over to Jorge and Hans for the closing remarks. And would just like to remind everyone that the recording of this session, as well as the presentations from our distinguished panelists, will be available on our website. Thank you very much. And I'll pass it on over to Jorge and Hans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mona. And before I do anything else, I'd like to call everyone's attention to Richard Morton's comment on the chat, which points out an important resource, especially with this digital or e-signatures. So before anything else happened, I did want to point that out and thank Richard for his contribution to the webinar itself. Well, what can I say? I can tell you that I'm leaving today with much more information and knowledge than when I arrived this morning. Far from being an expert like the panelists, I do feel that they touched on very important and salient points of the different dynamics, the importance of having an efficient communication between the port authorities and the customs, the different responsibilities of each agency by themselves and within one another, the importance of moving ahead digitally in concert with the other players or agents or agencies that have a part in the port community system. So in that sense, I cannot thank you enough. Vielen Dank, Uwe. Muchas gracias, Andrés Vázquez. And vielen Dank, Frank. I think that's how it goes according to their own languages. Again, like Mona has said, we will place the presentations and the recording. The recording is only up for 3 months, unfortunately. So if you want to download the webinar, please access the portal as of tomorrow, and then you'll be able to download the recording of the seminar, of the webinar, as well as the presentations. I think that the 3 events that we have done with PSCA, as they say it, I tend to call it IPSA in my mind, but I understand that is not the way to pronounce it. In any case, the relationship that we have built with them has been very productive in this year. We've had now 4 important webinars with the participation of about 400 individuals, or perhaps a bit more between all 4 of them, in issues related to technology, efficiency, and port operations. In this case, customs played an important part. So I express my thanks to both Richard and Hans for their support, as well as for the 3 speakers for giving us the time and their expertise and sharing their knowledge. That said, the SIP will continue its webinar activities. In fact, let me remind everyone that a week from today, on the 23rd, we will have a webinar on sustainable port operations, sustainability in terms of the environment. And we'll have people from RightShip, people from Carib MEPA, or the Caribbean Marine Environment Protection Association, as well as representatives from Piedrova, which is an associate member, and they will speak about sustainable dredging. And this is all in English, directed to the English-speaking Caribbean. So again, thank you everyone for your support. And my dear friend Hans, you, my friend, have the floor and the closing words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Thank you so much to the team, your team, Mona, Monica, yourself, and of course the technical staff in Mexico that deals with the operations of today. So it was great again to have you all online again. And of course, thank you, Uwe, Andrew, and Frank, for your presentations. And of course, the audience that I had the patience to be here for 2 hours listening to all the things and all the ins and outs about customs regulations and so on. It was really great. It was really great. Ports and customs. When we talk about ports, especially, we sometimes you talk about infrastructure about ports, and then you talk about rail, roads, waterways, quays, and those kind of things. But a part of the infrastructure is also logistics, and logistics is just a part where you come to formalities, to release of cargo, to formalities like from paper to digitalization, as Uwe said it. So customs are very much in the forefront of those formalities to be cleared as much as possible and as soon as possible, to give let's say the inland transport and the seagoing vessels a smooth ride into the country or on the sea to the other destinations. So very important to see that, and I want to specialize a special view on Frank Jensen's presentation about Abu Dhabi, where they are concentrating these inspections portals, for instance, to make it much more easier. That will be physically, and it will be also be logical. So I think that's also one of the opportunities for the other parts in the world to look at that opportunity, to look at that innovation on the logistic part and the physical transport. So yes, very informative. Thank you very much, and I hope to be in line with you soon again. Thank you so much.